Nancy Gokey's 2.5-week journey to the British Isles was about to begin, her and her mother leaving their Columbia home, spending the night at Dawn and Sister Kay's residence in Foster City, leaving her car for her return. Kay then chauffeuring her sister to San Francisco International for the afternoon United Airlines flight to London. United Airlines, having acquired Pan Am's overseas routes after the iconic airline's demise in 1991. The adventure beginning, an enthusiastic Nancy boarding the 747, settling in for her 11.5-hour non-stop journey to Heathrow Aerodrome. She would not be alone in her quest. Good friend Monica Johnson would join her the following day in Tenby, Wales. It was a 7:40 morning arrival at London Heathrow, Nancy bustling with activity, going through customs, then securing a bus for the 37-mile ride to the Reading Railroad Station, boarding the train for the 162-mile, 5-hour excursion to Tenby, Wales, the starting point for viewing the scenic landmarks and historic monuments of the United Kingdom. Nancy checking in at Ivy Bank Guest House for the night's lodging, somewhat bushed with all that had transpired that day. Her day beginning with the sights of Tenby, finding the walls that enclosed the original 12th century town very impressive with their 4 gateways and towers, built in 1133. In 1457, the walls were raised and widened for the militia garrison's movement. The moat surrounding the town was also widened to a width of 30 feet. The visitor was somewhat disappointed that all that remained of the 1133 Tenby Castle, built on a rocky promontory facing the sea, was a token ruin. Standing on Castle Hill, viewing the 2.5 mile of pristine beach, Nancy humorously rationalized to herself, it was the Santa Cruz of Wales. Viewing the fort on St. Catherine Island from the beach, noting it was not accessible at times because of its isthmus status. The fort being commissioned in 1859 as a defensive measure for the aggressive Napoleon III, but wasn't built until 1870, and by then the threat was gone, as was Napoleon. On the way to lunch viewing the Deer Park Baptist Church, built in 1885, and upon entering, deciding the interior not as lavish as the exterior. The Pembrokeshire Coast National Park consisted of 243 square miles of landscapes, rugged cliffs, sandy beaches, wooded estuaries, the moorland of the Priestley Hills and the wooded Gwan Valley. Although it was on her list to see, Nancy accepting, there wasn't enough time to take in everything. Her first stop was viewing the Carew Castle, then moving on to the site where the Celtic ancestry lived and built their hilltop fortresses some 2,000 years ago. Nancy soon discovering that Celtic heritage was integral to the national identity in Wales. Welsh, the Celtic language, was still widely spoken and printed for use in directional signs. From the coast, able to view across the channel at the 13th century Aberidi Tower. Then moving on to the township of St. David's viewing St. David's Cathedral. The monastic community was founded by St. David, abbot of Menevia, in 500 AD. In 1081, the infamous William the Conqueror visited St. David's to pray, bestowing it as a holy sanctuary. Later in 1115, King Henry I of England, in recognition, commenced the construction of a new cathedral, and in 1123, Pope Calixtus II bestowed a papal privilege upon the cathedral, making it a center of pilgrimage, with a papal decree. 2 pilgrimages to St. David's is equal to 1 to Rome. Nancy returning to Tenby, the travel agency having made a reservation for 2 at the Bulston Cottage Guest House B&B, and with Monica's arrival at 8, the air of enthusiasm abounded. The morning found them saying goodbye to Tenby, the two boarding the train depot for the short 10-mile ride to the Pembroke dock, and the ferry to Rosslare, Ireland, but on their arrival not expecting the 12-block walk to the ferry terminal. The 4-hour crossing taking much longer, with rain and rough seas. Once again on firm ground, a stop at budget one-way car rentals, picking up a Renault Clio, but immediately having a problem, having to ask someone how to put it in reverse. With directions in hand, the two arriving at the Clifford House B&B. Built in 1898 as a Victorian summer house, with beautiful landscaped gardens overlooking the Irish Sea. It was getting late, the two walking to the Kilrain pub and restaurant in the rain, only to find, because of the late hour, the restaurant had stopped serving, deciding that chips and ale would suffice. The morning found a visit to the Johnstown Castle, an 18-minute drive. The inaugural castle and tower house built in the late 12th century by the Esmond family after the Norman invasion. The family, Catholics, were expelled during the anti-Catholic Cromwellian years in the 1600s, the Brogan family taking possession. In the 1800s, the family created the Johnstown Castle as it stands today on the bones of the original castle. The only disappointment, as the castle was Nancy's favorite thus far, was, it wasn't open to the public. The exploration continuing, driving through Ferrycarrig to the Irish National Heritage Park, a parkland of 35 acres with estuary trails and wetland forest. Stopping to view the huts of the Neolithic settlers who introduced cereal cultivars, better known as grains, and domesticated animals such as cattle and sheep, plus the stone monuments. Viewing an exhibit of the Bronze Age, beginning around 2500 BC, where people's everyday life changed with the innovations of the wheel, the harnessing oxen, the weaving textiles. A continuous march through history, viewing the results of a later Celtic ancestry, the building of their ring forts, numerous throughout all of Ireland, and then the arrival of the Vikings in 795. Nancy and Monica thoroughly enjoying their walking tour through Irish history, remaining for lunch on the grass picnic area of the park. On the road again, stopping at Enniscorthy to view the Enniscorthy Castle, the inquisitors entering, expecting to see 12th century furnishings, instead finding that each room was furnished according to a different time period in the castle's history. Somewhat disappointed, but recognized the importance of the display. The two in the Renault Clio getting turned around, having difficulty finding their directions, but finally on the road to Waterford, their next stop, a accessible seaport municipality of over 45,000, being the country's oldest city, founded by Vikings in 914 AD. The city world-renowned for its Waterford crystal, its glass and crystal-making industry legacy dating back to 1783. The travelers B&B but a 10-minute walk to the Waterford Glass Factory, the two entering and being introduced to the art of glass blowing. The explorers on the road again, traveling from Waterford down the coast, then journeying west to Kenmare, the 3-hour drive a little long, but enjoyable. The change of scenery presenting a different view of Ireland, the rural life, slowing for a farmer and his dog herding sheep on the road, and later another, only with cattle. Kenmare located at the head of Kenmare Bay where the Roddy River flows into the sea. The entire area was granted to the English scientist Sir William Petty by Oliver Cromwell, as part payment for completing the mapping of Ireland. Arriving in Kenmare, the two having a need for directions and a bite to eat, having read the signs for fine food and beverage at the Sailor's Bar, B. O'Sullivan's, the two not hesitant, enjoying both the meal and the Irish ale. The Ring of Kerry is a 111-mile circular tourist route, running clockwise south from Killarney, following the highway to Kenmare, then the up around the Ivoric Peninsula to Killorglin, going through several hamlets before returning to Killarney. The scenic route takes in the sea coast beaches, Tor Waterfall, Ross Castle, as well as other historic presentations. The adventurers having entered the realm of the ring in Kenmare, viewing the Greenland Circle of Stones, the site being what is called a disturbed site, at one time having 9 stones standing, but only 4 remained. The hour waning, having secured directions to Mrs. Lovett's farm, 2 miles out of town, their host for the night's lodging, it was time to call it a day. The morning brisk sea breeze giving notice of where they were, viewing an unbelievable treasure. The Kerry Cliffs, poised 1,000 feet above the Atlantic, Mother Nature presenting an unprecedented landmark from an hostile desert environment 400 million years ago. The Renault Clio continuing its Ring of Kerry drive, introducing them to Ballinskillig's castle, but in reality it was a tower house built in the 16th century by McCarthy More. Its purpose was twofold. First, to safeguard the bay from pirates, and the second was see that incoming trade ships paid their tariffs. The 2 travelers on their way to Killarney, crossing the Sneem River, taking notice of the picturesque community of Sneem. With their arrival in Killarney, they were somewhat surprised at its size of 13,000, the citadel sitting on the banks of Lake Loch Lean, the largest of 3 nearby lakes, and home to Ross Castle. After checking in at the cottage guest house, Nancy and Monica were ready for a night of relaxing, visiting Murphy's Bar and Restaurant for dinner, and deciding to extend their night, remaining until 11:30, listening to live traditional Irish music. After a clothes wash day morning before checking out, it was time to say goodbye to Ireland and hello to Scotland. The 2 again heading north, a 4-hour drive to Dublin, the sea coast Irish capital. The travelers having no difficulty finding their nautical destination. The route was well marked with directional signs having a picture of a ferry on them. Nancy and Monica also saying goodbye to the Renault Clio, leaving their reliable transportation at the dock. The petitioners of yesteryear boarding the Irish ferry for Holyhead, Scotland. Their voyage of discovery to continue.